Confidence intervals. So we're going to do an example on calculating and interpreting confidence intervals. So in this problem, you're asked to construct a 95% confidence interval. 95% confidence interval, which, remember, is going to give you an interval of two numbers, right, that you, based on some error, right, that you are confident, you're 95% confident that the true value, whether it's a proportion or a mean, in this case mean, that the true mean is between these two numbers, the lower number and the upper number, based on your sample. And the number that's right in the middle of these two would be the mean of your sample. And then you subtract a specific margin of error and you add another specific margin of error to give you your interval. And it's all based on how accurate you want to be. So let's look at the problem and understand how to construct this 95% confidence interval. Sociologist develops tests to measure attitudes toward public transportation in 27, so N is 27, sample size. 27 randomly selected subjects were given the test. Their mean score of your sample is 76.2, and their standard deviation of their sample is 21.4. Construct a 95% confidence interval for the mean score of all such subjects. So you're taking your sample of 27 students and you're saying, well, I'm going to construct a confidence interval that says, I think I'm 95% confident that the actual true mean score of all such subjects would be between these two numbers. So the number in between, the mean we are assuming would be our sample mean. It's the best point estimate of the population mean. And to construct this, margin of error, well, it differs based on what kind of interval we are constructing. But to find how much error is involved, you need to know your critical value, your Z alpha or T alpha, depending on what kind of test you have, and then other than that, you need your values of N and sample standard deviation or population standard deviation, right? Depending again what values you're given. And then you can use a specific formula to calculate the margin of error. It's all based on these things: the sample size, the standard deviation, and the critical values. So this specific problem, you do not know the population standard deviation. So we need to do then a T interval for this mean 95% confidence interval. So there is actually a program in the calculator to run a T interval test for means. It's in stat test number 8 T interval. So we're going to run a T interval based on the sample mean of 76.2, the standard deviation of 21.4, and size of 27. Confidence interval 0.95. And we get these. A T interval between 67 67 67.7 and 84.7. So that's our 95% confidence interval for the true mean score of all such subjects for this specific problem. What does that mean? That means that we're 95% confident that the true mean score of all attitudes toward public transportation would be somewhere between 67.7 and 84.7. That means out of 100 random samples of the same size, we would expect 95 of them to have the mean in between these two numbers, and 5 of them to not have the mean in between those two numbers. So it's pretty confident that the mean is somewhere in between these two. All right, that's confidence intervals.